All right, once you pulled all your speakers out and you got your whole Jeep pretty much ripped apart, from this point, what I'm gonna start doing is running all the wires. So I got the radio harness here. We're gonna connect this radio harness to your factory harness, just like you're plugging the radio back in. And it's gonna give you a little length of wire here that you're gonna have to run to your knee bolster area. That's where your amplifier and everything is gonna be mounted. So to aid in installation, we got our trusty, like I think it's a 3-foot long zip tie. And you're gonna wanna run this down to your knee bolster area. Try to be mindful when you're running this down that you're gonna have this clump of wires here with the connector on it that you're gonna be pulling through. But once that zip tie is at a nice spot here, we're gonna tape this and pull this right through. All right, and I like to leave a little flag on that tape. When you go to unravel your harness, you're not fighting the tape at the bottom. All right, once your zip tie is all the way through with your harness, you can go ahead and untape that connector, and we'll have to run this zip tie back through because we're going to be running some wires back up to the radio. All right, we'll do the same thing, run this down there. All right, once your zip tie reaches the bottom here, all right, you got your main harness here with the power feed lines on it. At that main connector, you're gonna have this group of wires here with a small connector on it. This little black connector is the connector that you need to run up towards the radio and plug that into the pass-through harness that we just installed. So grab this end, tape it to the zip tie, and then we'll pull it up. All right, once you get it to the top, untape your connector and we'll plug that into the harness. Now on the harness here you have two connectors. One is labeled for amplified, factory amplified systems. This Jeep doesn't have a factory amp, so we're gonna plug it into the connector that is open and free. And we can pull the slack out of there, make sure we have enough cable for the amplifier to plug into. All the wires you're gonna want to kind of reach that center position of your cross bracing at your knee bolster. Right, and from here we'll plug this connector in. And as you depress that paddle, it'll pull itself in. Whenever you connect these two connectors together, just give it a nice tug after you're done, and that'll ensure that you made a nice solid connection. We can grab our factory radio and plug it all back in. All right, with your factory radio connected, we'll move on to the remainder of the wiring, which is wiring the power wire into the engine bay and over to the battery. All right, so for the next step, we're gonna have to run the main yellow power wires up through into the engine bay. So to do that, there's a grommet here. It's a round grommet. It's kind of like a twist lock grommet. On the Firewall here, it's up underneath the dash to the left of the brake pedal. You can pretty much just push it out of the way, and you can grab that from the engine bay, and we're gonna have to take that and drill a hole through it to run our wires. All right, once you get that out, you're gonna have to drill a 5/16 hole, I believe, into the center of this grommet, and we'll run our wire right through here. All right, so we're gonna drill a hole in the center here. It's a good idea to use some strip caulk or silicone or something after you drill the hole and run the wires through to just kind of smush that on there. So before you run your yellow wires through your grommet, through the Firewall, you want to make sure this whole wiring harness and bundle and everything is up over the cross beam here. You don't want any wires kind of looping around back here. So what we'll do is we'll just run this whole bundle over these cross supports, pull that through. Once it's down on this side, we'll get our yellow wires and we'll run these up through. the hole in the firewall. we'll move to the engine bay and pull the rest through. All right, so once you got your wires through your firewall, you want to make sure you don't pull too much, because you're gonna actually be pulling this whole harness back towards the firewall, and it's not going to be able to plug into the amplifiers. So what I'm going to do while I'm running the wires is I'm just going to throw a zip tie around here just to hold that in place while I work in the engine bay. All right, once you get your wires pulled through and secured under the dash with that zip tie, you know you're not going to overextend the harness, and you're going to have enough slack for your amps. You can grab the 2 wires, run it through the grommet, pull it all the way through, and we have a little bit of strip caulking here, or butyl, that we're going to wrap around that hole once we pop that back into place. We're going to have to run this wire across this plastic conduit here onto the passenger side near that fuse panel. So to do that, we need to remove the 5 10mm nuts, and also once we remove those nuts, we're going to have to pull this reservoir out of the way to make room for us to run the wires through. So let's do that now. All right, you're just kind of moving it out of the way just to make enough room so you can pop this plastic cover here open. Let's go to the other side. Pull these 2 off. All right, to pop these out, you stick your flathead in there and kind of push down and out at the same time, and you'll release those clips. And just do that all along the conduit here, and we'll pop the top side of it free. All right, once you pop open this conduit all the way across, we can grab the supplied loom that they sent with the kit. You're gonna fish that over the wires. What I like to do is put a little bit of electrical tape or Tesa tape on the end of that loom. Just wrap that around real quick, and that kind of keeps it from popping off when we reach the bottom. Right into the conduit all the way down. And as you run that wire in there, you can snap the cover back in place. Once you get to kind of around the fuse terminal connections here, the power feeds for your fuse block. All right, as you work it over into the conduit, you'll get that little protruding portion here where the other wires are running down through. You just want to feed your wire straight down through there. All right, and then you can snap your conduit back into place. All right, once you have your wires pulled through the conduit here, you don't really need all this length, so we'll cut this down a little bit, and we're gonna add our fuse connection here. We have 2 wires going in, you have 1 connection that's gonna be attached to the fuse box. We'll cut this down, we'll strip it back, and connect it up. All right, we'll strip these back a little bit, maybe 1/8 of an inch or so, and we'll crimp it on to these butt connectors here. All right, and these are butt connectors that have heat shrink pre-attached to them, so you just got to heat that up. If you don't have a torch, you can use a little lighter. You don't want to burn it, you just want to get it warm so it shrinks around that wire or around that connection. All right, I'm gonna throw a little tape around the bottom of this loom also. Keep that on there. And what you want to do is pull off one of these nuts. This is probably a 1/2 inch or a 13. Pull pull the nut off and attach your ring terminal. Now it does come with two 30 amp fuses, but we're not going to install those yet. We'll just hook this up to the fuse panel and set it aside for now until we install the rest of the system. All right, so actually we're going to hit it up right on the battery here. This far left terminal is a 7/16. We'll pull that off and stick on our ring terminal. All right, we'll tighten this up. And like I said, don't put the fuses in until the system is completely installed. All right, once you got your wires connected to the battery terminal, we can throw our 10 millimeter bolts that we removed earlier. We can put our reservoir back up. All right, we can finish up the amp install inside the Jeep. All right, so back inside the Jeep here on the driver's side kick panel area, you have your door harness here. You're gonna have to remove this harness and pull this kick panel out. Pull out of there, and same type of connection that's on that radio is like a paddle connector. And it'll kind of push itself out when you flip that paddle. We can move this all out of the way. All right, and from here we can take off the kick panel. I believe it has a 10 millimeter nut somewhere on the side here. Yep, right there. And you should be able to just pull the panel towards the inside of the vehicle and it should pop free. And once your panel's out of the way, you have a grounding point right here that you're going to ground your amplifier. We'll run this line up here. Right down to here. This should be a 10 millimeter also. All right, now we can mount our amplifier and our processor. We'll cut that zip tie that we attached earlier. All right, and in your kit, you'll have some hardware. And if you notice on top here, you have a couple of threaded spots on your cross member here. Some Jeeps have a module here, ours does not. If you do have a module here, you'll have to pull that module off, and there is a provision on that new amplifier that will fit the module right underneath there, but we don't have that, so we can't show that to you. On the OEM Audio Plus's installation video, they do explain that pretty good detail. So if you do have that module, check their video. If not, continue along with us here. And I'm gonna kind of move this stuff out of the way for now. Also, they mentioned to move this bracket out of the way, but I find you don't really have to. You can get your module and kind of just slide it over and get it into place pretty easily. If you go from underneath, from here, we can put the bolts in and support our amplifier a little bit. All right, underneath, for the front mounting points on the amplifier bracket, our holes aren't threaded here. Some of you may have a threaded mounting point here with factory 8 millimeter bolts in there. Ours did not. Your kit will include some hardware to feed through here, but we're doing something a little different. We're just gonna tap these holes with a self-tapping bolt. So I did one side already, so this side is ready to go. We'll just do the same thing for this side, and you shouldn't have to do this for your install though. And it is aluminum, so it is actually really easy to tap. All right. We have our holes on our cross member down here threaded and ready to go. So we pulled the amplifier back out so you can kind of see what needs to happen here. Once the amplifier is in there, you're not going to be able to see this connection here. You basically plug the power and ground in on the side of the amp. You have your speaker output, so this is for your subwoofers. you would run this behind and over that cross member like we did with all the other wiring. And this is going to connect to the sub harness. I believe OEM Audio calls it the sub umbilical cord. So basically it's this large spool of wire that's going to connect to the output of the amp and run all the way to the rear and connect to your speaker, your subwoofer back there. Then on the other side of the amplifier, you have your input connection from the processor and the other amplifier. So basically this will be mounted up on top here. This unit will be mounted underneath. It's actually going to be utilizing this 10mm mount as well. And then this red and black 4-pin harness will plug into the side of the amplifier. And lastly, you have a gain control for the subwoofer here, if I can show that. So this plugs in back here, and this is basically your preference where you want to mount this. I have a spot in mind that we'll show you in the next step where we're going to be putting this, but as of right now, all we need to do is plug this in to the amplifier, and we'll route everything up here. And once your processor is plugged in with its amplifier also, you have another connection on the side that's going to plug in here, and your connection from the radio that's going to plug in. And you have a quick disconnect for that remote wire also. So when it's all said and done, this whole section will be occupied by your 2 amps and your processor. Alright, so now that we got our amp and DSP all wired in, we're going to run our little bass knob right to this panel in front of your shifter. It's got a rubber thing that's kind of attaching it so it doesn't fall off right here. That's attached to this little protruding nub right here, just like that. So you just pop that off, and essentially this is just going to be used to mount our gain control, and we'll have to notch out a tiny bit in the back so that wire can tuck underneath there. Alright, so once you get your little panel off, and before we mount this is just what we're doing. You can put this anywhere you want. I chose this location just because this panel is easy to remove, and it's going to have some holes in it, so if we needed to replace this because we have to pull this off. Yeah, once you get your little panel off, you could mount it in the center. I feel like if I mounted it more to the side, it's going to give easier access in between both of our shift knobs here. So that's where I'm going to put it. I'm going to kind of center it up. Because it's only in plastic, I'll mark the screw hole locations with my pick. Alright, now that I got those marked, I'm going to put a couple of screws in there. Alright, now to make a little bit of room for our wire, I'm just going to notch right in the center of our 2 holes here, just a little bit with my flush cutters, and that'll allow the panel to snap back down flush and have our wire popping up through there. Alright, and that should be good enough. I'll attach the gain control, and then I'll show you how to run those wires. Alright, in order to get your gain control wire in the panel, we're going to use our zip tie again. And we're going to run it down to the side of the transmission tunnel. Alright, once your zip tie is back here somewhere, carpet should pop off. And actually, yep, there it is. There's our zip tie. So you'll grab the end of the gain control, we'll tape it to our zip tie and pull it up through. Pull this up through. And we don't need this whole bundle to come up. I'll loop this up and zip tie it up underneath the dash, but I'm only going to pull what I need through. Alright, we'll clip this in place, and slide this back down and snap it back in. And there we go, our panel is back on. All right, so with our bundle, or with our wire, we're gonna bundle that into a loop. Just gonna wrap it around my hand, just like I'm doing like a water hose or something. I'll take this and throw a zip tie around it. There's actually a perfect little pouch area for this bundle of wires right under there. Then I'm gonna zip tie that wire coming down on this main harness here. All right, now all you gotta do is tuck your carpet. All right, and we'll tuck the carpet, button that back together, and now we can get into the fun stuff, all the speakers.